Hey now everybody, Jamie here from the Secret Cabal, and all week long I'm going to be talking about my very favorite games of all time. So sit back, pour yourself a cold beer. If you're watching this at work, you're not working anyway, so you may as well have a beer. So let's get on with it. My top 50 games of all time. Core Worlds. Now you're not going to find too many deck building games, just straight up deck building games on my list. Usually the games that I like integrate deck building into a grander game, so to speak. But Core Worlds, the reason I love it so much is because it hits the mark so solidly, both thematically and with so much replayability, with so many options for you to explore with the game. Now, essentially the theme is that you're sort of these barbaric fleets of ships that are out in the Outer Rim, and you're coming in and you're assaulting and taking planets as you go, trying to get to the core worlds, which are worth the most victory points. And all the while you're building a fleet by the things that you steal, the things that you take when you conquer these planets. And the cards that you buy every round as you're conquering these planets can be anything. They can be capital ships, space fighters, ground troops, robots, tanks, all sorts of different things, heroes even. And you're building a deck around those things. And as you play the game, your gameplay evolves based on what you've sort of conquered throughout the game. There's so many options, replayability options with this game. It's just a wonderful deck building game with fantastic artwork. Thematically and replayability, that's why Core Worlds is one of my favorite deck building games of all time. Rising Sun. Now this one's difficult because Eric Lang has made so many games that kind of fall into the same bucket. We have Rising Sun, Blood Rage, The Godfather, Chaos in the Old World, so many different games that are kind of similar in the way they roll out. Each one of them is very unique though, in like the way it gets there. So each one has its own niche, I would say, like a different kind of gameplay, but it all gets to the same territory control concept. And Rising Sun is one that it's so low on my list only because I have trouble getting the right number of players for it. I like it at high player counts, but there's so much to love about it. Other than that, the board is gorgeous. The territories, the way they're laid out, it just makes for well done territory control. Each of the factions are diverse, which is not, that's not the way many of those other ones are. Blood Rage and Godfather both don't have the asymmetric player powers that this one does, and it really impacts the game to a significant level. I love the card building concept in these games. This one and Blood Rage as well. You buy your monsters, and your monsters are your monsters for the game, and it feels like you have ownership and gives your faction personality. So man, I love Rising Sun as long as I get it to the right player count. Defenders of the Realm. Defenders of the Realm is one that takes Pandemic and makes it tons cooler because it's fantasy and you're fighting monsters and tyrants that are descending upon your city. And it has the Pandemic concept of all of the minions of those creatures are the things that are sort of piling up on the different territories and locations on the board that you have to clear them out, or they sort to expand in a Pandemic kind of way. The reason I like this one a lot better than Pandemic is because of the thematics and because that it just adds a little more to the game, just a little bit more, as in you have little quests, and many times those quests will yield you magic items that'll do cool things. I love the concept of the visual representation of the creatures, and they're marching down their paths towards the center. It's like a tower defense game, but sort of a long-term tower defense game, and there are 4 things attacking at once. Defenders of the Realm, amazing game. I hear there's a second edition coming along. I'm very excited about that. I hope that's true. Also, there was sort of a newer kind of edition of it. Defenders of the Last Stand was a post-apocalyptic version, which I really liked, but I still like sort of the purity of the original Defenders of the Realm. I wish maybe they would take a little bit from Defenders of the Last Stand and put it into a new edition of Defenders of the Realm. And I would like a little more. But really, Defenders of the Realm, fantastic cooperative game. You can't miss with this one. Plus, it's got Larry Elmore art, gives me that nostalgic feeling of Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s. It's gorgeous. Immortals. This one was difficult because Immortals is kind of in a trilogy of games that all play similarly, which is Immortals, and before that was Shogun, and before that was Wallenstein. I love Shogun so much. I have the Shogun big box, and it's just a fantastic game. And it was very difficult to decide which one I wanted to put on the list because they're so similar. But really, Immortals got the edge because it has the fantasy theme, and it's such a unique fantasy theme. There's two worlds. There's the underworld and there's the light world. And as you pass between them, you play two different races, a light race and a dark race. And as they kind of shift realities, they become a different faction. So you're controlling points. It's a very cool territory control game. And this trilogy of games uses the cube tower for combat, in that you throw your troops in and your opponent's troops in at the same time. Whatever comes out the bottom is how you resolve combat. And what I really love about that is because it's used so well, it doesn't feel gimmicky in the game. It feels like it achieves what it's supposed to achieve with this combat. Amazing game. It's an unsung hero. I don't hear people talking about it ever. Check it out. Immortals. Great territory control game. Clank in Space. I was so resistant to play Clank when it first came out because it looks silly. The artwork looks silly, the mishmash of different fantasy things in it, and I just wasn't into it. But I finally did play it, and I kicked myself because damn, is it a great game. Clank in Space is the one that I got, though, myself, and I prefer it. It just has a little more to it. I love the space theme. I think all of the references in the cards are funny. Various, Doctor Who, Star Trek, Star Wars, all sorts of different references on those cards, and I enjoy that. I really like playing it. But what really makes it good is the gameplay. Clank is fantastic because it's a deck building game, and it's a push your luck game, and it's a race. You're racing to try to get as many of the artifacts as you can to score points, but you have to make it off of the ship. So you're pushing your luck. How far can I go onto the ship? Can I get that other one before somebody leaves and the whole thing collapses on me and I'm done? I love it. It's such a great game. There's lots of different ways to play it, lots of different decks you can build with the different cards that you have. Amazing game. Clank is really, I think, the pinnacle of deck building at this point, as far as deck building kind of integrated with a board game. Really love that game. Fantastic. And I just love the theme as well. MYTHOTOPIA. Martin Wallace is my favorite game designer. And this one is another one that's sort of under the radar, and I think it's because it's just so damn ugly. The artwork, the board, the box cover, the tokens aren't attractive. There's just nothing really all that attractive about the game, other than its sort of charm for its old style. It looks like a board game you might have found in the closet from like the 1960s or something. But what really makes this game great is its gameplay. It is terrific. It's in a trilogy of games similar to, like I talked about earlier with Immortals. It's in a trilogy of games, starting with A Few Acres of Snow, then it was MYTHOTOPIA, then A Handful of Stars. And there's some other games sort of tangentially around it, like A Study in Emerald, that had the same kinds of deck building in it. But there's another one, deck building, but it's a territory control war game. And what makes this one so neat is at the beginning of the game, you draft cards. You're buying cards to build a deck. There's not a ton of deck building later in the game. It happens right at the beginning. You can deck build later, but it happens mostly at the beginning. All of the races are symmetric. There's nothing different about them, but those cards you buy in the beginning are building the differences between your faction and the other player's factions. So every game you could have a different combination of cards and different combinations of powers that your kingdom is good at. Also, combat. What I love about the combat is the fact that it feels like medieval warfare because it takes a long time. It takes multiple turns to take a territory. In A Handful of Stars, it kind of changed because it's quick combat. It's over in one round. Whereas its predecessor, MYTHOTOPIA, it kept going, as in every round you would add troops to a location. Then the next player's turn, he could add troops to the location as well. It's sort of a game of chicken, waiting for your opponent to just give up. Then you defeat them in the war. And that makes it such a great dynamic because when you go into battle, you're committing yourself to that battle. And you could waste time if you're not ready for that battle yet. Love this game. It's a great, great, great war game. And some people say that the end game is a little bit wonky, and I agree. It can go on. It's basically one of those games where you say you have to declare that you're the winner. And if other players will see that you're going to declare on your turn that you're the winner, they'll come after you and stop you from winning. So it could go on for a long time. So I agree with that. But for the most part, 99% of the game, terrific war game. Genoa. This is one of the original Euro games that I bought way back when. And to this day, I still absolutely adore this game because it's all about the wheeling and dealing. There's action spaces all over the board, and you need to you take those actions by moving this little weird tower of discs. And every time you move a space, you leave a disc behind. So it shows like there's 5 discs, so you can move 5 spaces essentially. Every space that there's a disc in that you leave behind, you can take an action there, or any of the players can take an action there. And those other players are kind of bribing you, paying you to move the tower in a certain direction. You move it obviously where you want to go to take an action, but along the way, the other players can bribe you, pay you to take the actions on your path, or after you've taken an action, pay you to move it in a direction that'll benefit them. So this game is all about the wheeling and dealing. It's about how much is that space worth to you? How much is this other player going to pay me to move it the other direction? Back and forth, wheeling and dealing. It's delivering of messages. It's getting contracts and collecting resources to deliver orders, all sorts of different things. There's some power tokens you can get to do cool things. It's such a different style of game. I've never played any other game that gives me the same vibe as this one. It just feels good to play, and it feels like everybody's engaged in everybody's turn all the time. Wonderful game. If you've never checked it out, check out Genoa. Carson City. Just like the last one, this is one that I bought way back in the beginning of our when we're starting out with Euro games. Boy, do I adore this game, man. This game is so good. It stands the test of time like no other Euro game. It has a life to it. You're building a city in the Old West. You start off with these barren plains and only ranches and mines, and they're really valuable. But as the city gets built, it starts gobbling up all that space, and your ranches and mines aren't worth much anymore by the end of the game. You have to progress with the game, essentially, like progress with technology and time. The city is being built. As you're losing your money from the ranches and mines, you have to just give up and start building general stores and jails and hotels and stuff like that in the town. It's my favorite city building game. It's just an amazing game. And it's also one of the only Euro games, there's probably a bunch more, but it's one of the first Euro games where you can fight over action spaces. You take an action with your meeple, somebody else can just take that action too, and when they resolve, you duel, and the person with the most firepower gets to take the space. So there's fighting in a worker placement game. Man, you got to check out Carson City. Gotta. It's just a fantastic game. So happy that it came back in print recently. Star Wars Rebellion. Star Wars will always be in board gaming, in video gaming, in everything. And way back when, there was a video game called Star Wars Rebellion that Steve and I loved. This board game captures that in the best possible way for a board game. This game tells a Star Wars story like no other. Boy, is it great. I love the sort of hidden deduction kinds of games. Okay, you're looking for the hidden rebel base. It's on a planet somewhere, and you have to figure it out. Your probes are going out looking for it. All the while, you're fighting battles with your fleets and your ground troops. You're sending your characters out, Han Solo, Chewbacca, Lando, Luke, everybody out to do all sorts of missions, and the Empire is sending their bad guys, Vader, the Emperor, all of them out to stop them. The game tells a story as you're playing it. It's not a territory control game, even though it is, but that's not really the focus of the game. It's all about building your resources so that you can better defend the rebel base or find the rebel base. Boy, they did a fantastic job making a game that feels like Star Wars. This is the quintessential Star Wars game. Terraforming Mars. Now, I said Carson City was one of the best city building games ever. This one kind of feels like that too, but you're planet building in this one. Man, I listen, most people have played this game already, so they know what's great about this game. But essentially, I love the concept of all the different tracks, managing the different tracks, getting points with the, the atmosphere and the water and the oceans and that kind of stuff. I love managing the milestones, going for the milestones, the card play concept. Fantastic. And that's actually probably one of my favorite things about the game is how you get a hand of cards, a pretty sizable hands of cards at the beginning of the game. Many of those cards aren't really even useful now, that you must use them late game. So you can see the cards you're going to have late game if you choose to keep them and continue to hold them until that time and sort of build towards them. So you can see almost like an end game strategy with the game near the beginning of the game and work towards it. There's not many games that are like that. And boy, this game just did it right. And it feels like you are constructing something. You're having a positive impact on the board. I really love it. Terraforming Mars, fantastic game. All right, gang. Well, that was my number 50 through 41. Come on back tomorrow when I'm going to give you the next 10. We're going to be doing this from Monday through Friday. So see you tomorrow, everybody.
Thanks so much, everybody. If you've enjoyed this video, please do us a giant favor by subscribing to the channel and clicking that wacky bell icon. If you're into board games, miniatures games, role-playing games, we have a bunch of audio podcasts you might enjoy. You can find those at thesecretcabal.com or on iTunes and Stitcher.